Local 500 4 years ago, back in 2014, in an effort to pass a bill that you're going to hear about in just a few moments, that would improve things for people studying and teaching and working at Maryland's community colleges. That has never come up for a vote in the Senate Finance Committee, or at least 5 years. We've been pushing for it. And some of you might think that's a familiar story of something you're passionate about, and it never makes its way through the legislature. But I have graduate degrees, I have a PhD. I took political science classes as an undergraduate in college, took civics in high school, and I watched Schoolhouse Rock when I was a kid. I thought I knew how a bicameral legislature works, and Mike Miller has taught me differently. Has taught me that it works a little bit differently, but we need it to work more like it's supposed to, and that's why we're here. You're going to hear about a few pieces of legislation, issues that people are frustrated that this legislature has been unable to do enough about since 1987, when Mike Miller has been the president of the Senate. Our first speaker is my adjunct colleague, Joan Bevilacqua, who's going to talk about community college collective bargaining.
Hi, welcome to spring. As an adjunct professor at Howard Community College, I work hard to give my students an education that prepares them to succeed. But pay for adjunct faculty is so low that it is a struggle for many of us to afford our homes, groceries for our families, and health insurance. That's why adjuncts want to join together and bargain collectively for a fair shake for us and for our students. We had the votes in the General Assembly to pass a collective bargaining bill for adjunct professors at the community colleges. We had the votes. It should have been easy. Democrats have a veto-proof majority in both chambers, and collective bargaining is a democratic right. We had the votes. So why did Senator President Mike Miller stop our bill? Mike Miller blocked our collective bargaining bill for adjunct professors, the people who teach 80% of the community college courses here in Maryland. Now you might be thinking, it cannot have been a Democrat. Democrats are supposed to side with equality and justice and the rights of workers, but not Mike Miller. He took his power and used it for no good reason except he was mad. Mad about something that had nothing to do with our bill. Mad Mike Miller killed our bill. And some of his friends, Mad Mike killed our bill. And some of his
killed our bill.
Mad Mike killed our bill.
Mad Mike killed our bill. Mad Mike killed our bill.
And some of his friends in the Senate went right along with it. That's dirty politics. That's not governing.
Right.
The bad news for Mike is that there's a political price to pay for standing in the way of change. Today, we're sending a message that our time for change is now.
Yes.
It's time to get Mike Miller and his lieutenants out of Annapolis. Election day is just around the corner, and the time to fight back is now.
Thanks, Joan. It's been 5 years that Joan and I have been coming here to argue for collective bargaining rights, repeating the same stories over and over again about why we need it, how it's not just about money, it's really more about power. People have power, don't like to give it up. And Mike Miller has a lot of power. On a similar note, next I'd like to step up to the microphone and Mike Feldman talk about the Fight for 15 campaign.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Feldman, and I'm a constituent on the Eastern Shore of Maryland out in Somerset County, the poorest county in the state. And I wanted to do something a little bit different for you guys. So one of the things we don't often talk about in these conversations are the real consequences to the people on the ground, the people that live in this state and in this country. I am someone who has gone through several periods of homelessness, the latest through my stint in Maryland. I was convinced by my family to move back up to Maryland a few years ago. They told me they would help me get back to school so that I could get a degree, because everybody tells you have to get a degree to get a good job. So I did. And unfortunately, because of some familial consequences and my parents splitting up, I suddenly found myself with no place to stay. I was currently working full-time as a delivery driver at Domino's Pizza, and found myself every night having to sleep in my car in the Seaford, Delaware Walmart parking lot next to where I worked. And unfortunately, it was very cold, as it tends to be up here, something I'm still not quite used to. And you can't leave your car running all night, so I would sleep in the cold and go to work the next day in the same clothes that I had worn the day before, because I didn't have anywhere to go do my laundry. And it didn't make any sense to me how we could have a government or a legislature or a Senate president that could see the kind of suffering that people like me were going through and do nothing. And it didn't make sense to me that I could work full-time, as you're told to do, and that if you work full-time, you must be able to make enough to survive. Well, I think, seeing everyone here, that is not the case. So I'm here today to tell you that I still stand with the Fight for 15 Coalition, and we demand that we get a living wage in Maryland. And if that can't be done with Mike Miller, then we don't need Mike Miller.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. I think I saw with the Goucher poll said 66% of Marylanders support raising minimum wage to 15. Yeah, it seemed to be the politically smart thing to support it. Yeah. Take a hike, Mike. Next, on the microphone, we have a MCPS employee and SEIU Local 500 member, Ruth Musicant.
All right.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
As an employee at the Montgomery County School System, a mom and a grandmother, I care about the children living and learning in Maryland. In our state, we believe it's important to protect children from gun violence. Usually, elected officials stand with us. But Senate President Mike Miller doesn't stand with students or teachers or families. He's too busy accepting thousands of dollars in money from the National Rifle Association. Just last week, he blocked legislation to study the effects of gun violence on children. So it's no secret whose side he's on. When Mike Miller sides with the NRA, children are unsafe. Teachers and coaches are unsafe. Our schools and communities are unsafe. Time is running out for legislators like Mike Miller who side with the NRA instead of with children, teachers, and families. I believe it's time for Maryland to fulfill its promise to our children. Mike Miller is standing in our way. Take a hike, Mike!
Take a hike, Mike! Take a hike, Mike! Take a hike, Mike! Take a hike, Mike! Take a hike, Mike! Take a hike, Mike!
Thanks, Ruth. Friend of the NRA, but he's not a friend of ours. That tells us something. Our next speaker, if you're looking for a good cause to get behind, look for her because she's probably leading it. I'm down from Baltimore, so glad that she's here today with the group Not Without Black Women, Brittany Oliver.
All right, how y'all doing tonight? Good. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I am not alone. Women who work here in Annapolis at the state capitol face harassment on a daily basis. It jeopardizes our careers. and it makes us feel unsafe on the job and causes lasting damage in our lives. I told my story as an advocate and decided to speak up because of the culture of silence and sexual harassment must end, and it must end right now. In response to stories from countless courageous women from the House of Delegates passed model legislation designed to protect survivors and staffers from predatory members of the legislature. This is not okay. It was a moment of hope for all of us who have been harassed while we were trying to do our jobs and advance in careers that we love. But Mike Miller wouldn't even give us a hearing in the Senate. Shame. Because Mike Miller blocked this bill, I'm not safe in the state capitol. As a woman, as an advocate who has been advocating on women's rights issues for over several years, I'm here on behalf of Nina Smith, a black woman who advocated about the harassment that she faced for all the years that she worked in Annapolis. I'm also here on behalf of Neil Carter. We are all survivors. Women aren't safe in Annapolis. That's a problem, and it needs to stop right now. So now it's time for Mike Miller and his lieutenants to take a hike out of the state Senate, out of the Capitol. If you're not going to put women and our safety first, it's time for you to go.
That's right!
Voters are tired of watching elected leaders block progress. At the time of the Me Too movement, the Fight for 15, and as well as student-led groups that are advocating against gun violence, it is time for our legislators who want to hold us back to take a hike.
Take a hike!
Take a hike! Take a hike! Take a hike! Take a hike!
Take a hike! Take a hike!
On behalf of all of the survivors in Annapolis, we are going to continue to fight for survivors. Right now, the sexual harassment bill from the last I heard was sitting in the conference committee. It needs to be moved right now.
That's right!
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Take a hike, Mike.
Take a hike!